notion of trust and cooperation amid a field of uncertainty is what largely defines our last and final article, John Mearsheimer's Back to the Future. Now, I assigned this article for a number of reasons, and I like to end our discussion of realism specifically with this article. If you read it, you probably thought to yourself, boy, I can't believe somebody could be that wrong predicting how the world would work. Right? It's like, I mean, you know, you almost have to like, I don't think anybody could be that wrong if they even tried. You know? So you got to think to yourself, Mearsheimer must really have been back in zero. Here's the thing, John Mearsheimer is one of the most respected scholars in IR studies. Right? Still around, still publishing, was a student, as was a number of other people that we will be reading this semester under the late, great Ken Waltz. Right? So Mearsheimer is no fool. So why did I sign this article? Yes, his predictions were almost comically wrong. That's one of the reasons. His predictions were wrong, but his theory and the rationale behind his predictions aren't necessarily incorrect. What do I mean by this? The article was published around 1990, 1991, which means that he was writing this somewhere between 6 to 12 months prior to that. So he's writing his predictions about what's going to happen in Europe in a very narrow window of diplomatic change, because he's writing this really with two things that are bookending it. One thing already happened, and the other thing had yet to happen. This is 1990. What already happened? What recently happened in Europe at that time?
The dissolution of the Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact?
The dissolution of Warsaw Pact, that much is certain, which by extension means the dissolution of what else?
NATO?
Nope, NATO's still around. Remember?
Yeah.
However, keep that in mind, because that's one of the reasons why Mearsheimer said we should disband it. But Warsaw Pact is disbanded, but what else is disbanded? What else ends?
Berlin Wall.
Berlin Wall comes down. All right, we're all looking at historical events that explain this. World War II ended 45 years earlier. I think it's safe enough to say that, yes.
Fall of Soviet Union.
Yeah.
It was the reunification of East and West
Germany
Germany.
reunified, yes. And what else?
The Cold War ended.
The Cold War ended. See, this is a bit difficult, because we tend to think that the Cold War ending and the Soviet Union falling apart are two sides of the same coin. No. The Cold War ends at the end of 1989, beginning of 1990, which means that the Soviet Union withdraws its support for all those communist regimes. So the Cold War, with all of those communist satellites, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, whatever, all come to an end. However, and this is the weird thing, the Soviet Union survives until 1991. Soviet Union as a communist state survives for another year and a half, 2 years. Now Mearsheimer is writing this article within this very narrow period, so the predictions that he's making are as bold as they are problematic. Why am I mentioning all of this? Because of what Mearsheimer is predicting will happen in Europe. What Mearsheimer is predicting the next 10 to 20 years will happen, based upon what he feels has already happened in the past. Number one, and here he's right on the money, here he's playing to Waltz's bipolar, multipolar, unipolar structure. Mearsheimer says that the Cold War was, ironically, the longest stretch of peace and stability that Europe had seen in more than a century. Now, mind you, that was largely because there were two large armies pointing guns at each other. And not only that, they were armed with the one weapon that kind of makes you important in the room. All together now. Nuclear weapons. Okay? So, in an ironic structure, The bipolar system between the United States and the Soviet Union was extremely successful because there were no wars that were fought in Europe, at least in Europe. Okay? No weapons were fired, no country was invaded. The bipolar system, therefore, is stable because of not only an equal military balance between the two sides, but also nuclear deterrence. A couple of other things that was, for the most part, widely understood during the Cold War is that military balance was visibly seen between two military alliances. Warsaw Pact was for the East, and what was for the West? NATO, still around today. An attack on one is an attack on all. This alliance was also seen by Mearsheimer and others as a great way of keeping Germany, well, straitjacketed for a while. Because left to their own devices, Germany will, at some point, be like, look at the time, let's invade a country. You can almost set your clock to it. Every 50 years, Germany invades France, okay? The Cold War period basically kept the Americans in, the Russians engaged, the Germans down, the French quiet, and the British relevant. As long as this system endured, okay, stability and status quo is guaranteed. Okay? So even though the system was far from peaceful, ironically enough weapons, and this is those pro-Second Amendment guys' greatest dream, right? Everybody gets a gun, nobody's going to get shot type of thing. Okay? This is what the NRA is trying to envision, right? Until everything comes crashing down. Until the Cold War ends. Until the Soviets do one thing that nobody was expecting them to do. What the hell does this happen? It's one thing that communist countries would collapse. It's another thing for the Soviet Union, specifically Gorbachev, to decide, I'm going to take the Red Army out of Eastern Europe. Right? I'm pulling my forces back to the Soviet Union. Hey, communist countries over there, you're on your own. If you can survive, well, great. I'd be surprised. But if you can't, well, find a better alternative to socialism. The elimination of Warsaw Pact is the first thing that Mearsheimer looks at and says, well, wait a minute. NATO has achieved its mission. Okay? NATO has achieved its goal. NATO's goal was protection of Western and West Central Europe from an imminent Soviet invasion. Soviets are now reducing they're withdrawing their troops. Warsaw Pact has disbanded. So the first thing that Mearsheimer says is NATO should be disbanded. But you're like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. Well, no, it makes complete and total sense. Because NATO achieved its goal. There is no more need for NATO in Europe. And if there's no more need for Europe, and there's no more need for NATO in Europe, then there's no more need for the United States to be as powerful and as prominent as it is in Europe. And again, you think to yourself, wow, really? Is that what a realist would say? Absolutely. Because as far as Mearsheimer was concerned, the United States would immediately go from being seen as a protector and a force for security to a hegemon that is there uninvited. Right? The French, the Brits, the Italians, and even the Germans would look to the Americans and say, hey, the Russians took their toys away. Go take yours and go home. Thanks, but there's 45 years. We don't need you anymore. The minute the United States is like, no, man, we need America here. Right? It's like it goes from being thanks for protecting us to, oh, no. No, we don't want that. Okay? As a matter of fact, Mearsheimer even goes one step further. Mearsheimer's like, okay, Soviet Union is now like over there. Germany has reunited. And here's probably the one place where he really goes off the handle. He's like, well, Germany reunited. They'll probably want to, I don't know, flex their muscles again. So, you know what we want to do? Just to beat them to it, because they're gonna get it anyway, because Lord knows they invented this shit. We should just give them nuclear weapons. Just give Germany nuclear weapons, because it'll make them feel better. Right? Because here they of Europe. They got France over here with nuclear weapons, which is kind of funny. You have Russia over here with nuclear weapons. That's kind of scary. Okay, you got Brits over here who don't really give a damn. And that's about it. So just give the Germans nuclear weapons because they're going to actually feel much more secure. You know? Kind of like give the baby his toys. He'll shut up, type of thing. So give Germany nuclear weapons and, well, for God's sake, they already have the formulas. So it's not going to be, as a matter of fact, just give them a few here, and here's just one to start off with. You know, sort of like if you sign up with Gameplay or whatever, you get like $10 free money to just pass around whatever during the, you know, draft season. You know, here's a few atomic bombs just to get you started. You're like, oh, about that. Right? You know? Because what Mearsheimer is also saying, in spite of, despite all of these crazy predictions, Mearsheimer is actually right on the money when he says, look, the end of the Cold War is going to eventually be the end of the bipolar system. Now, a bipolar system is either going to morph into one or the other polarities. One of the two. Of the three, bi, multi, and uni, which is the least stable? Multi? How many people think multi? Raise your hand. And by process of elimination, what's the other one? How many people think uni is going to be the most dangerous? Unipolars is the most dangerous. And why is that? Because when there's only one country at the top, everybody wants to knock it down. If it's a bipolar system, you can think to yourself, all right, I'll accept my second-rate status because, you know, gang, posse, it's all good. Multipolar is certainly less stable than a bipolar system. Make no mistake about it. But a multipolar system could still ensure stability by a number of intricate alliance systems. A unipolar system is the least stable. We'll talk about that in a few weeks. But that's why Mearsheimer was saying to the United States, pack up your toys and go. Because you know what? It's going to happen. You, America, are going to be the unipolar power by default. And nobody wants to be that because unipolar powers don't last long. And when they realize that they're losing their leverage, unipolar powers start, like good realists, start making a number of precautionary steps to shore up their own security, which are almost always going to be seen by everybody else as belligerents. So America, take a word of advice, pack up your things, and go home. You won't be disliked. You might even be missed. You might even be missed. But if you stay, they're going to want you to go. So by default, Mearsheimer says, Europe is going to go towards a multipolar environment once again. Soviet Union is going to be one. Great Britain is going to be another. France is going to be that, another one. On a good day, when they really work hard at it, Italy is going to be a fourth. Okay? Italy is either the worst first-rate country or the best second-rate country. Whichever one, one of the two. When Italy decides that we're a second-rate country, dude, they are awesome. Okay? They are awesome as a second-rate country. But we all know, dude, it's the Germans. Okay? They're not going to be happy until we are number 5, right? So, okay, Germany, yay, good, all right, here's your army, here's your bombs, so you can feel comfortable. Yeah, whatever. And Poland, look, you may want to, oh, well, you're Poland. Sorry. We refer to Eastern Europe as, currency, that's all, between Germany and Russia. I mean, these things are just going to happen. In fact, if Germany really wants to, I think Mearsheimer even mentioned this in his article, if Germany wants to take back the territory that it lost to Poland, Poland should just kind of, well, Poland, you're used to this shit, aren't you? Your country is this, now it's like that, now it doesn't exist, so, I'm going to just play Thucydides. So the strong do it, the strong do it, and the weak just kind of be like, hey man, maybe you'll come back in a decade or a century, whatever, but you're Poland, right? And you got to think about these things, and you got to be like, John, Mearsheimer, are you all right here? Is this true? Okay. We've already talked about this, so it's not, it's not worth spending that much time on, the notion of nuclear proliferation. Mearsheimer was correct in predicting that more countries would gain nuclear power. Okay? That much is certain. Of course, he didn't guess which countries were going to be hit. But he said, again, Germany is going to and should get nuclear weapons simply because it would eliminate a security dilemma on their side. Okay? Poland's going to be, once again, fought over, not maybe so much for territory, but certainly for influence. As a matter of fact, when he says Poland, he might as well just expand that to all of Eastern Europe. And here, if you look at the way in which Europe is today, between Merkel on the left and Putin on the right, Eastern Europe is, for the most part, within there. Look, when Merkel and Putin get together and start laughing at jokes, Poland gets very, very worried. Okay? Ukraine gets very, very worried, okay? So that much is kind of, sort of, the case. America should withdraw from Europe, but here's the thing though. The Europe of 1990, argues Mearsheimer, will be very much the same, or be very similar to Europe of 1930. That's the title of his article, Back to the Future. He's not being like, oh, this is going to be great. Now, he's sort of like saying, oh crap, the Cold War ended. America, you're going to have to leave. They're going to want you back at some point because, well, World War III is probably, oh, look at the time, look at that, you know. But it's going to be multipolar, it's going to be volatile, it's going to be potentially belligerent, especially between Germany. And here's another thing. Mearsheimer did not predict the Soviet Union would collapse. Mearsheimer, along with a number of other well-respected policymakers and scholars and higher people, would say the Soviet Union would go on indefinitely. Okay? 15 minutes prior to the Soviet Union actually collapsing, we were all like, oh, this thing's going to be around forever. Nobody, and I mean as somebody who saw it on TV, I was there, man, right? Somebody who saw this stuff go down on TV, I was actually more surprised at how calm all the news reports were about, oh, look at that, they're lowering the hammer and sickle. The Soviet Union is no more. It's like, I'm Cold War generation kid. I mean, we had air raid drills in school and stuff. And I was actually surprised to find out how, I was more surprised at how calm everybody was, as opposed to the whole thing just came down collapsing. But nobody was predicting that the Soviet Union would collapse. Okay? So, with all of that said, Mearsheimer's article does have some importance to us. Okay? Mearsheimer is right on the money when he says that the end of one system of power is going to yield one of the other two. A bipolar system, and the realists aren't the only ones who are saying this, but it's a generally understood thing. Bipolar system is regarded as the most stable. It may not be the most peaceful. You have to remember, there's a difference between peaceful and stable. There's a difference between peaceful and stable. Both imply the lack of war. Everybody has to get along. When a bipolar system collapses, it is natural for one of the two powers that remains to be the unipolar power. Now, you want to be up there like Rocky Balboa and Rocky IV, we won the Cold War, yeah, whatever. Cool. You know what? Enjoy that for like, oh, I don't know, a month or two. And then gracefully bow out. Because a unipolar system is the least stable. Therefore, multipolar is probably going to be where it is. As a matter of fact, it's a constant evolutionary thing. A bipolar system naturally falls into unipolar. A unipolar system will invariably produce a multipolar system, which arguably, we could even say we're in right now, 2015. Arguably, we could say that we're back in a multipolar system. The United States is certainly one of those major powers, which then, over time, morphs back into a bipolar system. But America should withdraw, says Mearsheimer, to keep this era as short as possible and to avoid any ill will between America and its allies. So Mearsheimer is correct when he talks about the relationship between bipolar, multipolar, and unipolar. Mearsheimer is also, we have to give him credit for two things. One, we have to give him credit for playing the realist card and saying Cold War is over, Warsaw Pact has withdrawn, therefore it is natural that NATO withdraws. Right? There's no reason for NATO to function anymore. Obviously, that's not the case. Obviously, NATO still exists and encompasses almost every former communist country of Eastern Europe. Right? NATO actually started doing stuff after the Cold War.
But isn't NATO like kind of switching its goals now? Or
NATO switched its goals pretty much after the Cold War ended by trying to argue its continued existence, its continued relevancy. There are some countries in Western Europe, like France and even Germany, but more so France, that have been pushing for a type of united European army without the Americans. The United States is like, that's kind of funny, right? But at the same time, the United States is like, well, why? We're already here. You need our toys. So let's just, why ruin a good thing? We'll talk about that after the midterm. Okay? The other thing that we have to give credit to Mearsheimer for is that he may be wrong. Oh, in some cases he's totally wrong. Do you know what? He's one of the few people that were bold enough to make predictions about where the post-Cold War world would go. Now mind you, what he does not talk about in Europe, he doesn't mention the United Nations. He also doesn't mention this other organization in Europe that had been around for decades when the Cold War ended. You all know what it is. I heard it, say it again. European Union, which at the time, does anybody know what it was called back then? Before the European Union, it was called the European Community. European Community. Okay? Mearsheimer makes no mention of the European Community. Oh, and here's one other thing. Mearsheimer tends to forget that Germany went through about 45 years of soul searching. You know? You kind of forget about that. Now, it's not like the Berlin Wall comes down and we're all kind of like, all right, Einstein, here we go, let's do this again. You know? No. You know? Germans are probably the most pacifistic in Europe at the time, for good reason. Right? They're like, dude, you know what happens when you get angry and drunk. Okay, there's a reason why. Germany went through its 12-step program. They're done. Okay, they know what happens when they have one too many lockers. Right? Mearsheimer is also a great article to use because it highlights, I think, rather effectively, the poor predictive qualities of realism. Now, we've been talking about realism nonstop now for 3 class sessions. And you got to think to yourself, well, this makes sense. You know, why are we spending the rest of the time on liberalism and all this other crap? You know? Realism has got its weaknesses. And they are many. Okay? Realism has incredibly poor predictive qualities. Realism is stuck in a 20 to 25-year loop. Everything just repeats itself, from Thucydides up until now. Okay? Nobody predicted the end of the Soviet Union. Okay, I'm not going to blame realists for that because nobody predicted the end of the Soviet Union. But realism did not predict the continuity and expansion of NATO. Right? NATO's still around. NATO's still alive and well. Okay? Mearsheimer also did not predict the expansion and the political deepening of the European Union. Okay? European Union is a critically important institution, not only in facilitating democracy, but in spreading ideas of cooperation and peace. This is something that realism does not really look into. Something that we will start doing next week. When we look at, and that's not the cue to pack up the week. Whenever I say next week, people go, oh, please don't. Okay? Next week, when we look at things like commercial pacifism and democratic peace theory. Okay? So it's worth, in that regard, noting that in addition to being weak on historical subjectivity, realism, surprisingly enough, is weak on human agency. Even within the understandings of structural realism, that's Ken Waltz's ground, right, takes into account the individual level. The individual makes decisions based upon his or her commitments and responsibilities to the state, which is in relation to all other states in the international arena. Wonderful. So it's a fantastic conclusion. And yet, there are times when there are certain people that come to the fore, we talked about this last week, that make a whole bunch of decisions that people are kind of like, huh? I wasn't expecting that to happen. First of all, not only does the collapse of the Soviet Union not seen, but nobody would have expected Gorbachev to issue the order calling for the withdrawal of the Red Army. That's considered to be suicide. You pull the Red Army out, your satellite countries in Eastern Europe have little to stand on. The second thing is that nobody really predicted that Reagan and Gorbachev would get along so bloody well. You know, in the years that have followed Reagan's presidency, and worse, his death, you know, there's a good number of people in the United States that are absolutely convinced that Ronald Reagan is the greatest president since George Washington. Right? He's like a god. Okay? Oh yeah, when Ronald Reagan died, people are like, oh yeah, Ronald Reagan, he defeated the evil empire. He destroyed the Soviet Union. And I'm like, guys, I remember Reagan. He really didn't do that. Yeah, he gave a bunch of belligerent American speeches, but nothing in comparison to what happens now. And Reagan would not have been able to accomplish any of that if it hadn't been for cooperation with Gorbachev. That is painfully obvious. Okay? Reagan could have been as hawkish as he wanted. Gorbachev could have been like, okay, you want to have war, let's go on booties. Okay? No. Because before he was all like, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down his wall. Okay? He was already cutting deals with Gorbachev. They were great friends. They got along splendidly. Okay? And there's no prediction that certain political values will prevail in this system. Look, the system is anarchic. That much is certain. But it's not as anarchic as realism, or more specifically Mearsheimer, predicted. You know, this is not 1945. It's 1990. Okay? The Germans were not goose-stepping to marching music. They were dancing to David Hasselhoff on the wall. Okay? The point that I'm trying to make is, it's 1990. It's not 1945. It's not 1939. It's not 2500 BC. Attitudes change. Memories of war prevent certain actions from being taken, and social progress exists. One would like to think that after 2 world wars, Germany kind of got the message. But more importantly than that, more than just making fun of German belligerency, if Germany wanted to take over Poland, they don't even have to take over Poland. They could buy Poland. It's 1990. Germans are not reeling from economic sanctions. The Germans are coming off of 45 years of the best economic buzz out there. They're having fun with everybody. 1939, the usual statement in Eastern Europe was, oh shit, the Germans are coming. 1990, oh, awesome, the Germans are coming. And what are they coming with? They're coming not with tanks and guns and bombs and planes. They're coming with briefcases full of Deutschmarks, ready to buy things up. Yay! Let's capitalism, yo! And they're not even bringing in the importance of the UN, NATO, or the European Union to, at the absolute least, make certain that you're not swimming in the deep end. They may not be authoritative bodies, but they're good lifeguards. Okay? NATO has done a fantastic job of providing security in Europe. What Mearsheimer gets wrong is that NATO is not an American appendage. Rather, it is a military coalition of which the United States is part of, but it is not the only player. Okay? The European Union has done tremendous strides in facilitating economic cooperation between previously belligerent powers. The thought of Germany and France going to war today is unthinkable. And why is that? Because if Germany invades France, not saying that they couldn't, and I'm not saying that they wouldn't win, but you know what would be the first thing that they would destroy? Their own economic infrastructure. Why would you shoot yourself in the foot? And vice versa. Right? And vice versa. Will Germany invade Russia? Again, first of all, it's a general rule of thumb, just don't invade Russia. It's just a general rule of thumb. There is only one group of people in world history that invaded and conquered Russia. And you'd have to think these guys must be even more badass than the Russians. The Mongols. They're pretty damn badass, if you want my opinion. The Mongols were the only people to invade and conquer all of Russia. And even then, it was a slog, okay? But Germany doesn't have to worry about that. Or Russia doesn't need to invade Eastern Europe. Wonder why? Because of economic interests. You don't need to do that stuff anymore. The states may be the primary actors, but they're no longer the sole actors. Okay? And that leads us to our prelude, to liberalism. This is where, this is really more or less rhetorical questions. Because if realism can only take us so far, then there has to be another field of study that gives us answers, better answers to questions that they can't answer. Okay? And you don't even have to write this down all that much, because we're going to be starting this pretty much next week, but it's worth asking. Do collective ideologies prevail in the international system? Mearsheimer's article indirectly tells us, yes, they do. The ideology of democracy, the ideology of free market capitalism. Are there incentives for states to cooperate rather than compete? Right? Realism says, oh, it's in your best interest to remain defensive. Liberalism says, hey, no, there's incentives to cooperate as well. We can get a whole bunch of stuff out of here, right? Is stability enhanced by international institutions? At the risk of, throwing an opinion out, yeah, why not? Are state policies driven by both self-interest as well as, and here's one that could really make things interesting, pursuit of a greater good? You gotta think about this. There are a good number of countries out there, folks, the one that we're living in, chief, that does a lot of stuff based on what they feel is the greater good, not just for self-interest. Now, can the two be mixed together? Sure, we call them Wilsonian realists. We'll get to them in a few weeks. And finally, and this one right over here, could either be the best sinecure for world peace or the greatest harbinger for perpetuation of war on the way of peace. Can the spread of democracy eliminate war? Can a country become democratic and as such cut the belligerent stuff out? Well, the two best countries that we can look at that we've tamed, Japan, they went from kamikaze to Hello Kitty. A couple of bombs probably, screwed them up a little bit like that. The Japanese are great people, somehow very weird as well. And Germany, they went from 2 world wars to a number of World Cups. Okay? Today, the refugees streaming into Europe are basically like, get the fuck out of my way until I get to Germany. I can't wait to get to Germany. I want to go to Germany because Germany's awesome, right? Because what are they doing in there? Oh, they're doing something right? I mean, today, if you take my comparative politics class, and you took it, I think it's fair enough to say Germany is one of the most successful democracies, if not in the world, certainly in Europe. Is Germany belligerent today? Not really. Well, if you ask Greece, a different story, but economically it's a different story. Militarily? No. Can't. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, that brings our discussion of liberalism, of realism, to a close. Thank you all. For next week, Chapter 4, Liberalism in the Text